Hi, my name is Jonathan Hicks, and this evening I'm joined by
Steve.
Tony. Mark.
Jack.
and we've just finished playing Unfathomable, which is a Cthulhu-themed reskin of Battlestar Galactica, if you're familiar with that, essentially. So we are on this sort of ship, was it Atlantica or something? And we're being attacked by these gribbly monsters, Cthulhu-type things that keep crawling out of the sea and attacking us. So these are the characters, and it's going to feel very much like Arkham Horror in that you're kind of moving around. You can take actions in certain spaces. So the chapel or the captain's cabin or whatever it is allow you to take various actions, and you're trying to kind of stave off the attack of monsters while advancing to your destination, essentially. Now, an important thing is this track here, the boat track. The good guys are trying to advance the boat to here a few times. Each time they get to the end, they're going to be drawing one of these cards, which will give them progress. And if they get to 12 progress, then the good guys will win the game.
No, you have to get rounded once more.
Oh, and then, sorry, then it's one more. So they have to get this total to 12. Each time this gets to the end, they get one of these cards, and it resets. So then they get to the end again, and they'll get another card. Oh, this one's 4. But potentially there's going to be bad things happening as well. So you'd lose 2 fuel and 2 food. You've got a few tracks here. So the fuel track would go down, you see in this point in the game. It's already down to 2. And you'd lose 2 food like this. And having got the total to 12, and this is reset, you then have to get to the end again, and then the good guys to win. If you're not familiar with Battlestar Galactica, I should say this is a hidden role game, okay? So you're either going to be a human... Oh, there we go, it was a human card, Tony was a human. Or, like me, you might be a hybrid, which is basically a bad guy. There is a third option, you could be a cultist. Now, interestingly, the hybrids just want to defeat the humans. So if you die, which happens if any of these 4 tracks gets to 0, then you die and you fail. Or the ship can be damaged by these rampaging Cthulhuan monsters. The damage will have some kind of negative effect, and you can take an action to try and get rid of it. But if too many, that 6 of these sections get damaged, that's another way you can lose the game. And as I say, the hybrids just want you to get to lose at any point. If the humans lose, the hybrids win. However, the cultists want to get so far on the voyage, effectively, until they got this total to 12. And in the last stretch, when the shoreline is in sight, they want the boat to sink. So that they have a chance of swimming to shore, but the boat still sinks and all the humans lose. So they will win along with the hybrids if the boat sinks in that sort of final stretch of the voyage. So on your turn, typically, there's a couple of things you can do. So you can move to a new space. So maybe you decide to move to the galley, for example. And then you can take an action of a space. You could also attack a monster. Attacking a monster is pretty straightforward. You roll a d8, and if you get a 4 or more, you hit. So that would just kill off one of the monsters. That's good. But to give you an example of some of the actions you can take, the galley one, you can risk food to draw skill cards. And this is a really important part of the game. There are 5 different sorts of skill cards. And at the start of your turn, you're going to be drawing skill cards that match your current thing. So in this case, I would get 1 influence card, 2 lore cards, and 2 observation cards. So here's an example. Maybe this is my hand of cards. And you need to spend these to overcome tests, like sort of Arkham Horror style, which I'll come back to. But for instance, if I take the galley action, I get to draw 5 cards off any of the different stacks, so any of the different sorts of cards, and add them to my hand. You do discard down to 10 cards at the end of your hand. Other things you can do is you can try and advance down this sort of travel track here. There's another space that will let you move down the ritual track. Now, the interesting thing about the ritual track is, as this moves along, once it gets to the end, it sort of casts a spell which washes away everything that's not inside. So all of these spaces around the outside of the ship, stuff on there gets washed away, which could be good if you have monsters in this outside spot here or in the sea. When you sort of cast at the end of the ritual track, then all of these things get washed away. Great. Unfortunately, there may have been passengers that have been stranded out on the sort of outside of the ship. And if they get washed away, then you flip them over and bad things happen. So in this case, you would lose 1 soul overboard, and so you drop the soul track. So the more of these things that you're losing, in this case, this is going to lose us, oh dear, an insanity and a soul. So there's only one of those left, and insanity goes down to 2. You can see it can get pretty hairy pretty quickly. This then resets. So periodically throughout the game, you're kind of washing away all the stuff on the outside. And if the good guys can time that right, they can actually get rid of a lot of the monsters. Obviously, there's these big bad guys as well, who kind of move around and spawn more of the little guys and attack and things like this. Other things you can do then are you can trade items between people. You can use an action card on your sheet. So some people have got action cards. I had a special ability here, which is when I roll a die, I can pick what the number is, but it's kind of once per game ability, and you kind of spend it, and then it's gone. So you've got abilities like that. You can also reveal as a traitor. So if you are a traitor like me, I can, obviously these are hidden at the start, I can flip this over and go, ha, I'm a traitor, and you have a special ability. In this case, I would get to add 4 of the deep ones, the Cthulhian monsters, in various different parts of the sea, which would then attack the ship. Now, once you've revealed as a traitor, you get this purple ring, and you get these traitor cards, which will do bad things. So spawn a deep one in the deep, and other things like this. But at the end of your turn, crucially, you're going to be drawing off this mythos deck, and whether you're a goodie or a baddie, this is going to happen. And you're trying to pass a test. So you have to hand in cards that will give you a value of 10 or more, and books and brains, whatever that is, will count towards the total. So you go round and you can kind of discuss this, and everyone says, oh, I've got, I can add some cards that will help, or some people say, no, I can't add anything that will help. But obviously you can lie all the way through this game, but then everybody puts some cards in. So Steve might add a card, and then Tony would add a card, and we kind of go around. And if I'm a bad guy, I can add a card that doesn't match. So if you add a card like the books that does match, that 2 would match and add 2 to the total. But if you add a card, you see this is a strength card, this doesn't match. So if I add this strength card, it actually subtracts from the total. So we all kind of put these in. You add a couple of random cards as well. You shuffle them all up so you don't know who's added what, and then you sort of flip them over and reveal them, and you're trying to count them. And so you count up all the ones that are positive and all the ones that are negative. So any books or brains would add to the total. So in this case, we've only got 3, but then we've got minus all these other things. So this would definitely be a failure. So in this case, if we pass, we sort of staved off the horrific visions, you get some flavor text. But if you fail, then you're going to lose sanity, which is one of the reasons. In fact, this is the reason I think how we managed to die in this game, and the hybrids managed to win in our game. Another interesting thing is that you only get one of these cards to start with, but halfway through the game, once the travelling total reaches 6, I think, you get dealt another card. If you have a hybrid and a human card, the hybrid kind of wins, if you like, it overrules the other one, and you are a hybrid. But when you reveal, you can pass your other card to somebody else. So if you've got 2 hybrid cards, you can effectively make somebody else a hybrid, which is quite interesting. So yeah, you play until the good guys manage to get all the way to the end, or until you die in some way, and either the good guys or the bad guys win accordingly. What do you think?
It is very similar to Battlestar Galactica. I think I prefer the theme here, and I quite like the cultist role. Although it feels like every game I've played of this sort of thing, I think this is my 3rd game of this variant of game, that the bad guys win. The ability, when you know later in the game that there are just so many people trying to detriment you, and you don't quite know who they are, because especially if you play with people who are good at bluffing, it feels like they have these quite explosive turns. I actually outed Jonathan by making people play their cards face up as a bad guy. He was going last, so in theory, before it gets to his turn, someone should brig him. And the other bad guys conspired at the turn we tried to brig him. They stopped us doing it by putting in the wrong sorts of cards. So
just to be clear, the brigging means you sort of vote to put them in the brig effectively. You have to spend cards to do it, and once they're in the brig, their abilities are massively reduced.
Yeah, so it's good, and it's the cultist role is really nice. I think it. I don't know whether it's balanced. It still feels like the bad guys have an edge. But you play this game, and it's a long game. And I know people are not going to like it for a long game, and usually this sort of like, you're taking about a turn an hour, especially on a first playthrough or something like that. But on these long games, you get in there, and you're 3.5 hours in, and someone goes, oh, well, I guess I better fail it then. And you go, oh, no, I was sure it was him, I was sure it was her, or whatever it was. And then you're trying to work out, well, who's helping them? And, and I'm like, well, we could wait till it's Jack brig him, but if Jack's the bad guy and Jack doesn't brig him, then Tony, you brig him, and then Mark jumps in and saves him. And so you get this wonderful kind of crescendo you're building up. And at one point, we cleared the board of bad guys. It looked like we were doing super favourable. And then people got their second card, and 2 of the 5 people who weren't bad turned bad, and kind of swung it in the bad guy's way. So if you like this sort of game, I think it's probably slightly better than Battlestar Galactica, but it is pretty much the same game.
Tony?
Okay, from a social point of view, I had such a giggle playing this game. I've not played. I've played lots of Secret Identity games and stuff like that, but I've not played this, and I did really, really enjoy it. But it's just watching people's reactions to things, stuff like that. I mean, I was human all the way through the game, and when I tried to bring Mark, or we was trying to bring Mark, because we thought he was the cultist. I was like, right, well, Steve's done this. I'm confident I don't need to put too much into this. And then it got screwed over by Mark and Jonathan and Lindsay as well. And it put suspicion on me because I put a few cards in. And yeah, at that moment I was like, I loved it, but I was like, oh, really, oh. So that moment was the highlight of the game for me. But I like the social interaction. One thing I do like about it is, I know it is a long game, but you can step away from the game and do a few things, if you haven't got much to do. You've took your turn, you go, okay, I'm going to step away for a moment, and it doesn't normally affect things too much. So if you're one of those people who likes a little break, you could do that. Yeah, so yeah, really good.
Mark?
Yeah, so yes, very much like BSG. I think I still margin for the BSG theme, but that's through the love of the TV show. Mechanically, it's slightly better than the original. They've taken a few of the smaller bits and inherited into it that were mainly in the first expansion, such as there's a boiler room, which is the equivalent of the old doing the jump drive, so that you could risk stuff to be able to move forward quicker. I don't think you can do that in the base version of the game, if I remember rightly. And they have stuff like the Deep, which is sort of like a very dumbed down version of the old Cylon board, where you bring ships on, so they aren't just randomly thrown onto the board. So yeah, they've taken little bits here and there just to make it a little bit better. I do prefer the Cultist to the old, the Sympathizer. It's just better. The old Sympathizer was a good bad. It was basically look at the tracks. If the tracks were at this point, this time in the game, you're either good or bad. This is a bit more managed, that I managed badly because I lost even though I was the Cultist, because it was all the time. But I enjoyed the fact that I was taking that risk. It's a very good game for people who like this sort of game. I do. It's an event game. It's not you're not going to put one of these out in 2 hours or anything like that. This is a game that people who like this sort of game will get together, play at the night, and they get memories from it, and that's, I guess, what it is. It's not necessarily mechanically the greatest game of the time. It's not. I mean, the card play is pretty good, and I do like how it works, but it's more about the interaction rather than the game itself. I mean, in a 4-hour game, you probably spend at most an hour actually doing things and 3 hours discussing doing things, and that's the point. This isn't a game about that really good move. It's about the bits you do with the people. So I think ultimately, if you like that sort of game, this is amazing. And if you're not into that sort of game, it's a long game. At least the box is more honest these days. It says 2 to 4 hours as opposed to 1 to 2 hours, probably like the original. So they've been a little bit more fair. I think it's great, but I would understand why people hate it on the other side as well.
Jack?
I'm going to start off and say, yes, it is just Battlestar Galactica. However, I'm under 30, so I don't know what Battlestar Galactica is. But I do know what Lovecraft stuff is, okay? And I think everyone there does. So I feel like that will appeal to a more broad audience these days. What I will say is that theme that it's got right now of the sort of eldritch sort of stuff is really appropriate for this sort of game, because all the other games that I think Elder Sign's quite short. Then there's like Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror. Those games can go on forever, but you're not having a bad time with it. It's just that they're long games, and you know that they're really tough. So I think even with this, we only had one traitor at the beginning. We found it later, but even up until that point, there were some shaky spots where we were like, if we don't play this right, we're going to lose. And that's part of the appeal of it, for the fact that the traitors don't often have to try as hard as they need to, because the game is just so incredibly hard. I think when we played it, there was a point where I took an item from the item deck, and no one had done it all game. And turns out the item just like permanently buffed my character. And we were like, okay, well, next time I think we're going straight to the cargo. We're all going to get an item, and we're all going to have a good time with it. So I think it's definitely going to go differently in future if we know what we're doing. yeah, it's very satisfying being right as well. when someone so for example, when I think Steve was calling Jonathan out a lot and saying he's doing dodgy stuff, oh, I don't know about that, and then Jonathan, like when Steve did his action and made sure that everyone had to pay their cards face up, and Jonathan went, well, I guess I'm not helping then, and Steve was like, I knew it. that moment is so satisfying, and I had been discussing almost all game to brig a certain player, and then turns out that they were the only one that was the cultist, the hybrid from the start. So I really should have just gone with my gut and just been the long arm of the law and brigged her early, basically. Yeah.
Rating?
Just one thing for that. The
Yeah.
one thing this offers because of length is that a lot of other ones that like Darkmoon, etc., because they're shorter, you have to be traitor from the start. In this, you can long con it. You have got time to slowly get there, which is one thing the length of the game does offer. That's one of the reasons why I think it's stronger.
Okay. Rating?
8.
As a game mechanically, it's probably like a 6.5. But as a chance to sit around with good mates with the right group, it's amazing. So, and that's like a 9 through enjoyment factor.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with Mark with that. It was fun to play, very much. The interaction, the social side of it was really fun. The game was like a vessel to make that social side really good, and it did it really well. I will give it 8.5.
Okay. Steve?
Very slow game for me, so I would rate it lower, but this experience is higher than I'm going to rate it. So I'm going to rate it a 7, but this experience has been great.
Okay. Yeah, it's a difficult one, this one. I very much agree with all the comments. It's long. Oh my goodness, is it long? I think it took us like 5 hours. And I think I had 5 or 6 turns in the course of those 5 hours. So you're really not going to be doing very much. However, as Mark was saying, you are spending a lot of time potentially on everybody's turn discussing what you ought to be doing, because you're always trying to influence. Obviously, if you're a good guy, you're trying to save the ship. If you're a bad guy, particularly at the start, you don't really want to help, but you don't want to give away that you're not helping. So it's nice being able to submit the cards, because you could submit kind of outright bad cards, and that would make it clear, oh, there's a traitor there. But you could just submit really low cards, submit your 1s and 2s, even hold on to your 4s and 5s, and then we keep failing these things like, oh, I'm sorry guys, I just didn't have the cards. So you can always do that kind of thing. So again, as they said, you'll know, I think, if you're going to like this kind of thing or not. If you don't mind the length and you don't mind not doing much and just kind of chatting and enjoying the experience, then it is very good for what it does, I think. In terms of my personal enjoyment, I'd probably be closer to Steve. The length of the game kind of does drag it down a bit for me in terms of how much I'm doing. So I think I'll be on a 7 out of 10. But as they all say, I think it is a very strong game for its genre. All right, thanks for watching. That was Unfathomable.